Some people say dolls like these are creepy, but I say they're wrong. The two here are my favorites. Their faces look so peaceful. Shall I show you? Shall I show you now?
A common tale around the school is the tale of Misaki, a girl who experienced a terrible fate. Although everything seemed normal shortly after she entered the 9th grade, she died in what was called an accident. Hidden deep beneath this truth, however, there was a student who believes Misaki to still be alive, leading to the other students believing the same, until her graduation. Now, with a new student enrolling into the class, it makes you wonder how they will react when he also sees Misaki still alive. Welcome to another where we see Koichi, our protagonist, who is woken up by his grandmother for sleeping in. She takes pity on his actions and lets it slide, then informs him that deep in the distance is the school he is set to attend. The woman in his room explains that the school is a nice academy, a majority of their family having attended it. Before his release, Koichi is visited by his classmates who introduce themselves. The nerdy-looking boy in the middle is Kazami, the other four eyes on the right is Sakuragi, and the soon-to-be tsundere is Izumi. After introducing themselves, they explain that they are the class officers and are in charge of his class. They inform him that they are here on behalf of the whole class, wishing he would get better soon. They pry into his past a little bit, asking why he chose to attend this specific academy. He explains his family's past with the school, asking why they are asking him all these questions anyways. Kazami then ignores him and presents a packet of homework, telling him to get it done soon. They then ask Koichi if they can become friends, hoping to get him adjusted to the tale of Misaki as soon as they can. Then once Koichi shakes hands with Izumi, she seems suspicious of him, asking if he really hasn't lived in the area before. He is still unsure of what she means, so he thinks nothing of it when they leave. Later that night, he boards an elevator where a mysterious girl is standing within it wearing the same emblem as his school. He decides to try and spit some game on her, asking what her name is, but she shows little interest. He then notices she is going to the lowest level, so he asks what she could be doing all the way down there. The girl explains that her other half is waiting for her and that she needs to go help her. Once arriving, Koichi asks the girl for her name, to which she tells him it's Misaki Mei. He thinks this whole situation is a bit strange but doesn't think too much of it. Later that week, once he gets released from the hospital, he gets woken up in the morning by an annoying bird. Following this, he calls his dad, who is in India, wishing him good luck at entering his new school. Before we continue, let's take a moment to answer the question of the day. How would you react if your classmates came to greet you but acted mad sus? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out in the next video. Now back to the recap. Koichi explains that he has been recovering well lately, him being tired of sitting around in a hospital bed. His father then explains that there is a hierarchy at the school, so he needs to be careful, but not to worry too much about it. His father then ends the call, leaving Koichi to figure out what to do with his day. He decides to go inside and talk to his senior, who explains the specifics of his class's rules. After listening to her ramble on about various things his grandparents call him for breakfast, he then goes to their voice and finds his grandfather sitting before a shrine in an emotional mood. Following this, he eats his breakfast and heads to school, where his teachers lead him to his class. With a dime as his teacher, Koichi gets excited to enter this new class. He introduces himself, however the students seem a bit strange, only speaking when the teachers urges them to. With a gloomy mood, Koichi enters his seat, still unknowing to what is to come. Once he takes his seat, he notices Misaki sitting in the corner, making him wonder what she is up to. Once his class ends, a bunch of people surround him like in every anime, asking about his interests. He explains that he is just an ordinary student from Tokyo, telling them it's just a big dump. The students continue asking him questions about various things, making it seem like they know a little too much about him. While talking, one of the other students asks him what his type in women is, telling the others the teacher is his ideal woman. Koichi then looks at Misaki's seat and asks where she is today. They tell him she must be absent, acting like there is nothing weird about him knowing who Misaki is. Later that day they have PE class, but Koichi decides to sit it out, not wanting to get embarrassed by the other students. Another weak student approaches him and tells him he wishes he could run fast one day. Koichi plays along, but something weird happens when the student starts acting sick and tells him he needs to leave. After this, Sakuragi approaches and asks where the student went. Koichi explains the odd situation, which leads her to ask him if he heard anything weird about the school. He explains to her that he just received a tour of the school, nothing weird happening. He then asks where Misaki is, telling her that she hasn't been to school in a while. This question catches Sakuragi off guard, but before she can respond, Koichi sees Misaki standing atop the school. He decides to investigate her on his own, and heads up to the rooftop to talk to her. He asks Misaki why she doesn't go to class and whether she is allowed to be up on the roof. Misaki tells him she's just vibing up here, so Koichi tries to keep the conversation going by asking about her drawing. Misaki gets defensive, telling Koichi that she doesn't like being questioned. Koichi asks her if she remembers meeting him on the elevator, to which Misaki responds in a different way. She tells Koichi that in the past something bad happened to the school associated with death. She continues by asking if he really doesn't know anything, hinting that he might have some sort of clue. Although she doesn't reveal much, this sparks a curiosity in Koichi after she informs him to stay away from her. She then mysteriously leaves Koichi to wonder what she was talking about. After school, he goes home that day, unsure what to think with Misaki appearing before him, but others acting like she doesn't exist. After getting accustomed to his school life, he grows the balls to approach Misaki once again. He offers her a trade, making Misaki forced to warn him of the dangers associated with her. After this, he heads to art class, where the dime piece acts as the teacher. Despite her telling the students their drawings are trash, they still don't mind because she is so fine. One of the male students then shows Koichi his piece, asking if he is really that bad. Koichi tells him it's better than he can do, which leads to them asking him to join their club. They tell him without being in a club, his high school life will be boring. He thinks about joining and strongly considers it after he is told the teacher is the one who watches over the art club. Following this, a student named Yuya, who was also the one showing off his art, walks with Koichi to their next class. He asks him why there is so much tension within the school, everyone seeming uptight. Yuya explains that's just how it's been, then another student approaches. He introduces himself as Naoya and asks him to invite him into the conversation next time he talks to the teacher. Koichi informs her that they were talking about something else, however, the dark side of the school. Koichi asks him if he has ever felt the uneasiness in the class, to which he reveals their class is cursed. This makes the two of them realize they are talking too much, so they inform Koichi they can talk about this another time. Then suddenly Koichi finds Misaki in a room before him, so he decides to enter, leaving the other two behind. After entering the class, he looks at her drawing and starts asking a bunch of questions as usual. She explains that her drawing is an angel, and that she doesn't like answering questions. Koichi then asks her what she was doing in the rain yesterday, followed by asking about her eye. She reminds him she doesn't like answering questions when a teacher approaches. He introduces himself as the librarian and urges Koichi to go on to class already, not including Misaki. Following this, once he wraps school off, he goes home to drink some orange juice with his aunt. He tells her about his day, including his encounter with the librarian, which causes her to chuckle. She tells Koichi that he has been there forever, him always being there when she attended. She then asks him if he is planning to join any clubs, to which Koichi expresses interest in the art club. She explains to him that if he joins the art club, he won't gain anything from it to help him graduate. Despite this, however, she urges him to join so that he at least has something to do. Following this, Koichi visits the hospital to hopefully rizz up one of the nurses. Having chatted it up with her previously, he buys her a drink and starts talking about books. She tells him that there must be another reason for his visit, asking why he came. Koichi explains that he is here to investigate a girl who visited while he was still hospitalized. She becomes suspicious of his request, telling Koichi she doesn't remember anyone visiting their hospital. He explains her build, which causes the nurse to get a little uneasy, telling Koichi a young patient died that day. She gives him her phone number and informs him that she will dig into it in return for him giving her an explanation once it's over. He accepts and heads to school the next day with only one thing on his mind. As he continues to wonder where Misaki is, other students glare at him, wondering what his deal is. At the end of school, before he heads home, he is stopped by Izumi, asking to talk for a moment. He explains that he was born at the hospital they visited, but never lived in the area other than that. She tells him that she swears to have met Koichi before, just being unable to pin when it was. As the head of countermeasures, Izumi informs Koichi that she is going to explain the truth to their class. As they are talking, Misaki walks by, causing Koichi's attention to be diverted. He chases after her, causing his fellow classmates to get angry. As he continues to tail her, he says nothing, making his plan seem madly suspicious. Eventually, after Misaki turns a corner, she disappears, making Koichi wonder what happened. He eventually walks around town until he stumbles upon a strange shop with a mysterious building. He gets scared away, but stops once he sees a doll that grabs his attention. As he stares at the doll, he receives a call from the nurse informing him she found out what he wanted. She informs him that years back a girl who wore an eye patch died in their hospital with the same name as her. As she explains the situation, the line cuts, making the tension rise even more. Koichi wonders what this could all mean, so he enters the sketchy shop hoping to find an answer. Upon entering, an old lady greets him and tells him that he can have anything half price off. Despite knowing he is broke, she lets him look around the shop, even going as far to offer tea. Koichi declines, thinking she is too sketchy, and decides to take a look around the store. After stumbling upon various dolls, he eventually finds a sign leading to the lower level with more dolls. Reluctantly, he enters, where he finds various dolls, some broken and some not. Out of all of them, however, one catches his attention specifically, a doll resembling Misaki. He stares at the doll, wondering why there is a doll of Misaki, which causes her to appear from behind the case. She asks him what he is doing here, asking if he likes looking at dolls. Koichi explains that he was just out exploring until he eventually stumbled upon this store. Misaki guides him around the bottom, eventually leading him to two naked dolls with relaxed faces. She then offers to show Koichi what's under her eye patch, asking if he can withstand her power. Once she unveils her eye patch, a green eye, similar to the one the doll had appeared. She explains that it's a fake eye implanted in her from a doll. Koichi becomes a bit uncomfortable, causing Misaki to explain to him that the dolls are all hollow. She then urges him to come back upstairs with her, where they sit on an old bench within the shop. Misaki explains that on the second floor of the store lives Kirika, the creator of all the dolls. Koichi then questions why she is so obsessed with dolls, her always being around them. He then explains that a girl died on the day she visited the hospital with the same name as her. Because of this, Koichi thinks she must have a sister, so he asks, but Misaki reveals she is an only child. He then remembers when the clerk told him that he was her only customer in a while, wondering why she didn't consider Misaki. Misaki then informs him that she warned him previously, but it's probably too late now. She explains that 26 years ago in Class C, there was a student sharing her name that excelled at everything. Once this girl hit the 9th grade, however, she died in a plane crash, while others say she died other ways. The reason didn't matter, however, with each student still believing she is still alive somehow. As she continues to explain the story, Koichi gets reminded of one girl when overhearing this. Misaki tells him that even the principal thought she was still alive, going as far as to present her a seat at graduation. Then when they took the photo with the girl who died to their surprise, she appeared in the photo. Misaki informs him that the girl who died was also named Misaki, which strikes fear into Koichi. Following this, he receives a phone call from his grandmother telling him it's already past his bedtime. Then when he gets off the phone, the clerk tells him to leave, making him look around to see Misaki gone. The next day he goes to school, where he talks about grades with his fellow classmates. They all walk about where they are going to go to high school the next year, some going to better schools than others. Naoya tells Kazami where he is going to school, bringing up the conversation of their upbringing. Naoya reminds him they have been together their whole lives, even being neighbors. Kazami then reminds him that despite this, there are some things that even he doesn't know. They then ask Koichi where he's going to school, to which he tells them of a place in Tokyo. The other students talk about going to Tokyo one day, all the while acting like Misaki's desk isn't always there. Koichi thinks that the school is just too normal for how strange some things are around here. As he looks off into the rain, Sakuragi approaches him, asking to walk home alongside hers. She explains that they live close by and it would make her feel safer. Koichi agrees, and the two head home together, leaving Koichi to ask more about the class. He questions what they did for their class trip last year, to which she explains they went to Tokyo the previous year. She tells him she wishes she could go to school in Tokyo, but her family can't afford it. This makes Koichi suspicious of her, forcing him to ask more about Misaki. He asks what her personality is like, which causes her to act rashly. She tells Koichi to never speak of Misaki's name, which makes him wonder what the deal is. He sees Naoya walking by and asks about Misaki's story, which causes them to press him for what he knows. Koichi explains what he knows, which makes them relieved by what he said. Then the fine teacher emerges and tells Koichi she will explain it all to him one day, him not yet being prepared. Once he finally gets home, he finds his aunt, who drank a little too much. Koichi decides to try and take advantage of this by asking about her past. He asks her about Misaki's story, to which she tells him that the story has been going around for a while now. He tells her that he knows the start of the story, but feels like there is more to it that he doesn't know. She tells him that it would be a waste of time to figure out more and to let it come naturally. She then informs him that his late mother was in the same class as Misaki from 26 years ago. He goes to school the next day with this knowledge, and finds Misaki on the rooftop yet again. After running to her location, he gets a call from Naoya, telling him to stop involving himself with things that don't exist. He tells him next month he will tell him everything, now just not being a good time. Following this, once he gets home, he calls the nurse, who tells him more about the patient. She tells him the girl's first name, which is different from Misaki's, relieving Koichi a bit. The next day at school, in the middle of a test, he decides to leave early in order to talk with Misaki. He informs her that the patient he was looking into was also named Misaki, asking if she really has no connection to her. Misaki then informs him that the girl was her cousin. Koichi then asks about the story of Misaki, wondering why everyone ignores her. Following this, Misaki tells him that she isn't real, with no one else other than him being able to see her. After she tells him this, Sakuragi leaves the classroom and runs when she sees Koichi standing beside her. As she is trying to flee, she falls down the stairs and drops her umbrella, which then pierces through her neck. The same day, Sakuragi's mother dies in a car accident, making rumors spread around the school about Class C. They call Class C cursed, with the curse of Misaki happening when someone talks with the ghost of Misaki. Once someone initiates this curse, a new person is said to die every month, whether it's a student or relative. Koichi has a hard time getting over her death, but eventually feels fine, so he visits the hospital. Once he gets there, he spits some game on the nurse, telling her that he needs her to do his regular checkup. She changes the conversation, telling him she is still trying to find out more about the girl who died. With that, she tells him she needs to get back to work, so Koichi decides to leave. The following day, he meets with the nurse for a lunch date, where she tells him more details. She explains that within his class, there are special rules that they have to follow. Despite her knowing this, she was unable to find out what the rules are. What she does know, however, is that Sakuragi's death wasn't just an accident, it had to do with the rules. Koichi wonders if it has to do with Misaki, so he asks the nurse if she knows who Misaki is. She tells him she doesn't know who she is talking about, asking if he has a crush on this girl. He tells her that it's not love, but rather something different, something much deeper than just love. He explains that Misaki is different from the other students, completely ignoring her and acting afraid of just her name. He also tells her that Misaki herself claims to be invisible, with the accident of his classmate happening right after she told him this. He also shares the story of Misaki, asking if she has heard it before. The nurse, however, went to a different middle school, so she doesn't know the details, but she says it sounds like a horror story. After this, Koichi makes sure to secure a second date, then he heads back home. On his way home, he is found by a classmate who asks what he is not doing at school. He tells her that he was out on a date, then asks her what she is currently doing. She explains that she's on a mission from Izumi, but is unable to reveal what it is. Following this, the glass wall on the car he was standing by suddenly falls, but Koichi stops it. After this, Koichi visits the doll store once again, to find the creator of the dolls go ahead of him inside to the second floor. Once he enters the store, the clerk acts like he has never been there before, reminding him she has no other customers. Koichi then heads down to the bottom floor of the doll store and looks at the doll similar to Misaki once again. Then, to his surprise, Misaki emerges from nothing and greets him like she didn't just teleport over. He asks what she is doing, to which Misaki reveals she only goes to school when she wants. Misaki then informs him that his class is currently in a state of chaos, thinking it has begun. He asks what it is, but Misaki tells him that he is not yet ready to learn exactly what it is. She tells him the less he knows, the better a chance he has at surviving, which makes Koichi stunned. He asks what she means by all of this, but she disappears as mysteriously as she appeared. The next morning he wakes up still wondering what is going on, so he asks his aunt for more information. She tells him that she has been having headaches constantly lately, and isn't unsure why. This makes him concerned, but he continues to ask her questions like what class she was in and such. His aunt, however, is unable to answer most of his questions, telling him it was over 15 years ago when she attended. He asks if she knows about the class rules, to which she tries to remember but can't. The following day at school, the students in the class talk about Sakuragi's death, wondering if it was a coincidence. Everyone looks upon Koichi's desk with uncertainty, wondering if it has started or not. Izumi explains that it can't be a coincidence that Sakuragi and her mother died on the same day, both to accidents. Izumi blames herself for not telling Koichi earlier, thinking if she had, they could have prevented Sakuragi's death. They wonder if they should tell Koichi now, but ultimately decide not to, and rather find new countermeasures. Koichi then enters the classroom, bringing the talking to a halt, making him wonder what is going on. Eventually, as the day goes, everyone becomes comfortable again. However, just Koichi's gaze is enough to shut people up. He thinks this is all really suspicious, so he calls Naoya to ask him to explain what he meant over the phone. With it being the next month, Koichi demands an explanation. However, Naoya explains he can't tell him. Izumi then explains that usually she is the one who explains everything, Naoya's promise being one he can't fulfill. Koichi persists, however, asking Naoya what he was planning on telling him. During this, he receives a call from the nurse asking if Misaki really exists. Koichi explains that he is sure she is real, to which she explains to him what her brother said. With her having a brother in the class, he told her that Misaki exists. During this, the nurse enters an elevator and dies from an accident much like how Sakuragi did. Naoya and Izumi overhear his phone, filled with the sounds of destruction revealing what ended up happening to his contact. Once he visits the site of her death, he wonders if this really is all just a big coincidence. His grandfather tells him he is tired of funerals, visiting them frequently. The following day, once Koichi arrives at school, he finds Misaki at school. He talks with her, trying to be discreet, but his classmates notice him. Later that day at art class, he learns that his art teacher has fallen ill, with her being unsure when she will return to school. Koichi plays it off as something normal people go through, but Yuya lets it slip that it might not be a coincidence. Koichi then inspects the previous year's yearbooks to try and find Misaki's records. As he looks through, he finds his mother's yearbook photo, which draws the attention of the librarian. He asks to see which is his mom, and once he does, the librarian knows who she is. He asks how she died, to which Koichi explains it happened 15 years ago, after she gave birth to him. Following this, Izumi approaches him and apologizes on behalf of her class. After this, Koichi is pulled aside by some police officers who question him about the nurse. They reveal they know he was talking to her in the elevator, Koichi wondering why it would matter. The policemen reveal that it was just a normal accident with the building's elevator cables already being pretty old. Koichi still finds it suspicious, so he goes to look around the classroom for some sort of clue to it all. While looking around his homeroom, teacher informs him that everyone has left the class and gone elsewhere. He then advises him to follow the class rules no matter what, without explaining exactly why. Later that day, Koichi meets with two classmates and asks them to walk home with him, hoping to get more information from them. As they walk, Yuya tells Koichi that he needs to be careful of his surroundings. He informs him something bad will happen to him soon, asking for him to be silent about the matter. Koichi then asks him for a copy of the class roster, wanting to confirm if Misaki really does exist. The other student then offers to answer any question Koichi could have, him feeling bad about the situation. His first question is about Misaki, however once he tries to answer his chest starts to hurt. He falls to the ground and ends up perishing a similar fate to other students. The next day at school he sees his art teacher, so he says hello, but she doesn't respond. He then heads to class and nobody even bats an eye his way despite him tapping his friend on the shoulder. The teacher enters and tells the class to always uphold the class rules, again making Koichi wonder what he is talking about. After class, Koichi talks with Yuya to ask him what's going on, but once he does, he rushes out of class. Koichi then tries his luck with other students, but they all ignore him, making Koichi forced to leave. He calls someone, but gets no response, making him wonder if he has started to disappear like Misaki. Later that day in class, Koichi tests the limits, getting up and leaving mid-lecture. Nothing happens to him, making him even more confused about the situation until later that day he finds a note on his desk. After inspecting the note, he goes to the doll store to hopefully encounter Misaki once again. As usual, she is waiting at the bottom floor, waiting for him to present a class roster. He then asks her if she knows anything about the students' deaths and why everyone is treating him like he's invisible. She informs him that he has become like her, someone who doesn't exist. Despite this, however, with the class roster, it revealed to Koichi that Misaki is a real person. She then reveals that she lives at the doll place with Kirika, the doll maker being her mother. Koichi finally gets an overall realization of what is going on, so he follows her upstairs. She guides him into her room and Misaki informs him he is now ready to know everything. Koichi starts by asking Misaki if she exists, to which she confirms that she really does exist. She informs him that in Class C they must treat someone like they don't exist, otherwise a curse will be upon them. With Koichi breaking this rule, the class decided to treat him like he didn't exist as well. Misaki then explains that ever since 26 years ago, there has always been a rule to treat someone like they don't exist. Every time they don't abide by the rules, another student or family member is added to the amount of people that die that month. With them unsure who is next and how to stop it, this has been their only solution for the past 26 years. Misaki explains that this has been happening before he entered the class, with 6 family members or students having already died this year. Misaki also reveals that whenever an extra student is added to the mix, it increases the amount of deaths that occur during that year. He asks if it's a ghost that is killing people, to which she explains that they don't know what it is haunting them. She tells him that since 26 years ago, Class C has gradually drawn closer to death. Despite trying to change the name or move classrooms, they got nowhere, making them change it back to how it was. They had no success until 10 years ago, when they found the method to treat someone invisible in order to make up that extra student number. When Misaki was first chosen to be ignored, she protested but had to accept with the rest of the class already accepting it. Yuya talks with Izumi, asking why they need to pick someone in the first place. With the addition of Koichi joining the class, they were forced to go pick Misaki early to be the one neglected. With this information, Koichi asks why they didn't tell him about the rule at the start. She explains that because he talked to her on the first day, the rules became void. He then asks why she has the old desk, to which she explains that it's a part of the rules. Whoever gets chosen has to use the oldest desk. Kirika then enters the room and apologizes to Misaki for looking like a bum. She then asks Koichi why he has become interested in her daughter, asking if she likes dolls. Misaki then tells her that Koichi will be leaving, so she guides him out. As she walks him home, Koichi questions why Kirika treats her like a stranger. Misaki then asks him what his relationship with his mother is, to which he explains she died 15 years ago. Misaki then informs Koichi that she hasn't told her mother about the Class C rules, not wanting to get her involved. After hearing Misaki's story, Koichi wonders if this really is the best solution to the issue. Despite how wrong this whole thing seems, Misaki seems alright with just accepting it. They then go to a park to talk more, where Koichi asks her why they made him a part of the invisible people now. She explains that they probably think by adding a second person it will increase the method. This shows just how desperate the situation is for them to go as far as they are to keep themselves safe. Misaki explains to him that although it's tough to live invisible, it's better than causing the loved ones of everyone else to die. Koichi then thanks her for telling him all of this, urging her to stay safe. Before they part ways, Misaki explains to him that when she was 4, one day she had a bad headache and fell unconscious. The next time she woke up, she had the new eye, but her mother told her to always hide it, calling it ugly. Koichi then expresses his feelings, telling her he thinks her fake eye is pretty. Misaki appreciates this compliment and tells Koichi that tomorrow they walk the same path. After going home, Koichi receives a call from his father, who seems to be in good health. Koichi takes this as an opportunity to ask him about Class 3, asking him if his mum's death had anything to do with it. He tells her that his aunt was in class the same year she died, but before he can continue talking, the line breaks up. The next day at school, Koichi and Misaki decide to take advantage of their invisibleness and dance around the classroom. After this, the two eat lunch together on the rooftop, with no one to stop them. Koichi reveals his own homemade meal, which makes Misaki ask him to cook for her one day. After sharing one of his skills, he asks about her drawing, wondering if she will show it to him one day. She explains that she just draws in her free time, her being more interested in books. She tells him that she hasn't been able to travel much in her life, so Koichi offers to take her to Tokyo one day. After this, the two continue to spend time together, making the days go by quickly. Whether it was at school or out of school, the two's relationship was growing hastily. One day, they head to the art room, where they are able to talk with students who aren't in Class C. As they talk, Yuya enters and tells them he needs to talk to them, leaving Misaki and Koichi to have the whole room. Following this, Koichi shows his mother and aunt pictures in the yearbook. While he shows them the pictures, the librarian talks to them. Misaki asks if it's okay for him to talk to them, however the librarian doesn't seem to care. Koichi then asks him how close he was to his mom, him being his homeroom teacher 26 years ago. Koichi asks if he is really okay talking to them, while he explains one of the rules to Koichi. With the only people being affected students and direct family members, he has nothing to worry about. Koichi asks about the nurse, to which he reveals if they are on the phone, the rule also applies. He informs them that he became the librarian out of fear, wanting to escape the curse. He then explains that only homeroom or assistant teachers have died from the curse. Koichi then asks him about the original Misaki, to which he informs Koichi the original was a boy. The librarian then presents a book containing the list of dead people from previous years. With some years having as little as 7 deaths, he asks how this was possible. The librarian explained that they used a different method, and the rules were different back then. He explains that one of the girls who died one year attended the class for 2 different years in the same class. With this unexplained phenomenon, he reveals that whoever becomes the deceased can have their name change on the paper. He then informs them that the current method works for about 50% of the time. Koichi then asks if having 2 non-existent students would increase the chances, to which he tells them probably not. They then learn the assistant teacher, aka the art teacher, was the homeroom teacher in the past. Like the librarian, she changed roles, however this year she was put as the assistant teacher again. He then gets home and asks his aunt about his mother's death, wondering if she had something to do with it. As she talks, she tries not to tell Koichi anything, trying to forget what happened. She reveals that during her year the curse stopped midway during the summer break. This gives him some kind of hint, but he ultimately gets no clues, causing him to go to school, then the next day still confused. While he is sitting down, the teacher enters and slams his bag on the table, telling the class he can't handle the stress anymore. He tells them that they couldn't understand his pain, which is followed by him pulling out a knife.